Welcome to Babylon's Fall. I'm your host, Greg Mailer. And once again, we are going to jump right into the commentary on John. If you're new to the channel, we are critiquing the Johannine literature, taking a magnifying glass to it and examining to see whether it is historical and whether the doctrine within makes any sense. And without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into the next section where we left off, why don't we? Okay, we left off in verse 43 of the first chapter, and that reads, "The following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee. And he found Philip and said to him, 'Follow me.' Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, 'We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph.' And Nathanael said to him, 'Can anything good come out of Nazareth?' Philip said to him, 'Come and see.'" Okay, so that's the text we're going to be going over in this video, and a couple things I want to point out. Number one, it's interesting that Jesus wanted to go to Galilee. I mean, okay, that's weird, because remember, this is taking place, as I said in the last video, 3 or 4 days walk from Galilee, down where John the Baptist is baptizing, and Jesus wants to go to Galilee. Okay, so we assume that that's where the narrative is going. So it's going to take 3 or 4 days to get up to Galilee. Along the way, he finds Philip out of nowhere, who's a new character introduced. Now, I do point out in my commentary that Philip is one of the 12 as well, but we don't know hardly anything about him except for what's in John's gospel, only by name in the other gospels. Now, there is a Philip in the book of Acts, but these are not the same two people. The one in Acts is a different disciple. I believe it says it right here. I forgot where I said it. Anyway, he is a different disciple than this one. Just keep that in mind as we go along. And so as he finds Philip, and as Jesus is going to Galilee, he finds Philip, says to follow him, and he just follows. And then it also says that Philip is from Bethsaida, which is also where Andrew and Peter are from. Now, there's a little bit of a discrepancy there, because in Mark 1:21 and 29, it says there, I'll just read it. Mark, who explicitly records that immediately after exiting the synagogue, Jesus entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. So at this point in the story, John is already there, once they get to Galilee at least. But we won't see John show up in this gospel at all, actually. Okay, so then, let's see. But that town is in Capernaum, okay? That's where the house is at of Andrew and Peter. And notice it says Simon, it doesn't say Peter there. Because as the story goes, as we talked about last video, Peter has not been named yet. He has not been renamed yet. Yet, as we already saw, this happens early on in John's gospel. Anyway, so once again, this right here, he's saying that Andrew and Peter are from Bethsaida. Yet, in Mark, they have a house in Capernaum. Now, those two cities were very close together, 2 or 3 miles. You could get there, 15-minute walk, maybe 30-minute walk. But still, there's a tension there. Like, were they from Bethsaida or Capernaum? I don't know. But according to John, it's different. Okay, so along the way, Philip found Nathanael. So I don't know where he found him. He just found him and said, Now this is interesting what Philip says here. So we don't know anything about Philip. Jesus just finds him and says, "Follow me." That's all we know about Philip. But somehow, along the way, Philip comes to find out that they found him whom Moses in the law, and also the prophets wrote. So that he literally knows that this is the predestined Messiah, whom Moses and the law prophets spoke about. He calls him Jesus of Nazareth, which is interesting. So he places the town of which Jesus is from, and Nazareth is in Galilee. And he also calls him the son of Joseph, which is weird because John the Baptist called him the son of God just a few verses earlier. And so all of a sudden we now know who his father is, as was supposed, because obviously in the Synoptic Gospels, they teach that he was miraculously conceived in the womb of Mary. And so it was only supposed that he was the son of Joseph. But here it says he's the son of Joseph. Now, Nathaniel basically doesn't believe at first because he believes that Nazareth is one of those towns, how could anything good come from there? It's like one of those euphemisms where today we will say, oh, well, how could anything good come from that city? It's just it's an expression. And, Philip invites him to come and see. So I think that might be a little bit of all I wanted to say in that part. We might move on to the next part. I do want to mention this, is that the idea that Philip already knows this, that they found him who's predicted in Moses and the law and the prophets, it's another unhistorical statement. Why do I know that? Because let's go look at Luke 24. Okay, this is in Luke's gospel after he is risen. This title here, he is risen. Okay, so now behold, two of them were traveling the same day to a village called Emmaus. Now this is on the same Sunday when Jesus rose from the dead. So they're going from Jerusalem on that same day to Emmaus back home after, and so it's 7 miles from Jerusalem. They walked together, and they were reasoning. As they were reasoning and talking amongst each other, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were strained so that they did not know him. He said to them, "What kind of conversation is that you have with one another as you walk and are sad?" The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the third day since these things happened. And in their mind, he had not risen from the dead. Yes, and certain women of our company arrived in the tomb early and astonished us when they did not find his body in the tomb. And they said they saw angels and things like that. Okay, so what did Jesus say to these two men? He says, "O foolish ones, slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he expounded them all the scriptures, the things concerning himself. Okay, a little bit later on, Jesus is seen in the upper room, I believe, by the 11 apostles right here. And this is where he says, "Behold, my hands and my feet, it is I myself. A spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see I have." Okay. And then a little bit later, they're talking, and it says, "The scriptures are opened. These are the words which I spoke to you when I was with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms concerning me." And he opened their understanding that they might comprehend the scriptures. But look, folks, this is like at the end of the story, okay? Now go back. Let's go back. Like, does it make sense that Philip already knows this right here? We have found him whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote. How does Philip know that? Like at the very beginning. Like, he just pops into the story. "Follow me." And all of a sudden he knows that. That's a problem, folks. Especially when the two people walking to Emmaus were hoping that he was the one to redeem Israel. You know what I mean? This is just completely unhistorical, completely different story. And once again, we find a new detail that essentially proves that fact. Let's move on to the next section, why don't we? In verse 47, it reads, "Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no deceit. Nathanael said to him, How do you know me? And Jesus answered and said to him, Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. Nathanael answered him and said to him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Whoa. Okay. All right. So the thing that I mentioned a lot of this in here, and obviously you can read this. I provide a link of this in all of the description. In all of my videos, you can find a link to this book that you can read on your own. It's in the description. But, okay, so the first thing I point out here is like, okay, let's just think about what had actually happened here. So what Jesus did is he somehow reported to him that he knew where he was when Philip called him, which was supposedly under a tree. Okay, now while that shows a little bit of like maybe foreknowledge, okay, I'll give you that. Would you expect him to go, Whoa, Rabbi, you're the Son of God. You're the King of Israel. I mean, just because you said you saw me under a tree. I mean, it literally makes no logical sense whatsoever. Especially to know these things. Rabbi, like, look, Nathanael doesn't even know who he is, y'all. How do you know me? Okay. He's been told by Philip that they found the one that's in the prophets. Okay, he knows that he's Jesus of Nazareth, son of Joseph, but he's already doubtful. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? And literally all Jesus does is basically say, I saw you under a fig tree. And all of a sudden he gives him the Son of God title and the King of Israel. This is a new one, King of Israel. Wow, no one said that yet. In the first chapter, we already have all the glorious titles of Jesus right out the gate. If this is believable, then I'm sorry, I can't believe this. I don't believe this happened. Why? Because I read the other Gospels and they didn't know this stuff until the end. Okay? That's why I cannot believe this. And honestly, I don't think anyone should believe this. And this is exact evidence against the entire narrative. It goes against the entire thing. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else in here. There is a quote that Strauss says here, and I would like to go over that quote real quick. Okay, David Strauss says, in John, Andrew, remember that's Peter's brother, after his first interview with Jesus, says to his brother, we have found the Messiah. We went over that already. And Philip describes him to Nathanael as the person foretold by Moses and the prophets. We just went over that. Nathanael salutes him as the Son of God and the King of Israel, and that's the part I just read. And with that, the subsequent confession of Peter appears merely as a renewed avowal of what had been a long familiar truth. In the synoptic evangelists, hold on a second, let me explain that one sentence. So when Peter says that when Jesus asks his disciples, who do they say I am? And Peter steps up and goes, you are the Son of God, the Christ. And then he said, blessed are you, for flesh and blood did not reveal that to you. What he's saying is that, well, what that appears to be is just an avowal of something that was already known at the very beginning, if John is correct. That's what Strauss is saying there. Okay. So in the synoptical evangelists, it is only after prolonged intercourse with Jesus and shortly before his sufferings, even after his resurrection, as I showed in Luke, that the ardent Peter arrives at the conclusion that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Matthew 16:16. It is impossible that this confession should make so strong an impression on Jesus that, in consequence of it, he should pronounce Peter blessed, and his confession the fruit of immediate divine revelation, as Matthew narrates. But here again, we must not lose sight of our approved canon, that in glorifying narratives, such as our Gospels, where various statements are confronted, that is the least probable which best subserves the object of glorification. Now, okay, so what does he mean there? Historians, this is his historian hat coming on. He's basically saying, look, our Gospels are embellishments after the fact, and whatever serves as the most glorious view is probably not correct from a historian hat perspective. That's basically what he's saying. Okay, so where would I leave off? So now this is the case with John's statement. So basically he's saying John's statement is the one, when you put your historian hats on, that we need to watch out for. According to which, from the commencement to the close of the public life of Jesus, his messiahship shines forth in unchanging splendor, while, according to the synoptical writers, it is liable to a variation in its light. In other words, in the synoptical gospels, they were trying to figure out who Jesus was the whole entire time. They didn't know it right at the beginning. This, however, is incomprehensible that the same reproach should not attach even more strongly to the fourth gospel than to the first, or to the synoptical writers in general. For it is surely more pardonable that the first three evangelists should give us pre-messianic memoirs in the wrong place, than that the fourth should not give them at all. More endurable in the former to mingle the two periods than in the latter, quite to obliterate the earlier one. Now, this quote here, I need to unpack it a little bit. And you can find this, actually, this document is actually free online. You can search up David Strauss, and I have the physical copy, but you can actually find it free online if you want to look all this up. But essentially what he means here is that in historical scholarship, they believe that there was kind of two periods of Jesus's ministry. The first period where Jesus wasn't even quite sure of who he fully was. And then in the second part, he started to realize, oh, I'm the one predicted in the scriptures. And I won't get into all that because that gets into a ton of different weeds and goes beyond the scope of like what I'm doing in my book. But basically, he's basically saying that, look, the synoptics wrote before John, and so it's more pardonable if they got some things wrong. Like for Matthew, if he wrote a story where he knew Jesus already, and that he should be baptizing him, that kind of gets the cart before the horse. Like John the Baptist didn't realize who Jesus was until later. Actually, since he died before. Anyway, it just presents the chronological error, because really the story was in Mark is that John the Baptist did not know Jesus either. Okay, and that gets into a bunch of other weeds as well. Okay. And it goes beyond the scope of this narrative, because even in Luke, if you accept the backstories, then you're going to have to explain why they didn't know each other. But again, in John's gospel, we've gone over it already. He claims that I did not know him. Twice he says, I did not know him. And so he's doubling down there on that. And I'll be honest, we don't know exactly what happened there, because we have these contradictory stories. Anyway, in Strauss's opinion, he believes it is more pardonable that the synoptics got it wrong or got some things out of place, and he places more blame on the fourth gospel, partially because he comes at the end of the canon, and he gives us a gospel where they know all of these things right at the beginning, all these points that I'm trying to say. And to me, I look at this kind of as a historian hat, but I also have a theologian hat. And I am a believer in Christ, and I'm a believer in his resurrection and things like that. But I look at all this and go like, okay, it's not pardonable for any of them to get anything wrong, because these people are supposedly writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and they should not be constructing contradictory stories at all. So I'm not going to pardon any of them. That's the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to actually look and see, how can I make sense of all this mess? I certainly reject John completely, because he's coming at the end, and he's giving you a completely different story. I mean, it would be the same thing if like somebody came up with a movie of a franchise that you love, for example, whatever it might be, and then in that fourth movie, they literally contradict things or embellish things, and you're sitting there as a person who loves the history of the show, and they go, no, they couldn't have known that then. No, that totally messes up the whole entire storyline, the whole canon, and that's exactly what John did. And so, no, I think we have to look at all these things critically, examine them, and ultimately, some of the things Matthew said could be wrong. Some of the things Mark said, we have to just look at these things one by one as they come to our attention. But John is the one we're focusing on now, and I believe his is the hijack of the entire story. So in some sense, I do give a little bit of pardon to the synoptics where they could get things wrong, because they at least held to the messiahship of Jesus as the human prophet of God. And John makes him God. And so anyway, there are two different categories going on here. And with that said, I believe, let's see if there's anything else I would like to say. maybe I might end with this right here. Nah, yeah, okay. I'll say this. It is not only the Trinity dogma, however, it is also the deterministic Calvinism of John 6 and John 10, and the anti-Semitism and the anti-Moses polemics, among other things, of which I also hope to expose along the way in this commentary, and to that I owe an immense intellectual debt to Strauss for exposing these fractures so undeniably. Okay, but where he merely mapped the blips like a radar, I am carrying the baton around the final lap to shatter the nest completely, not unlike Lieutenant Ripley in Aliens. And that, I like the Aliens franchise, so this actually is interesting because, like, say that they made a movie that completely contradicts something that Lieutenant Ripley says, and that's what I'm saying. John did. And so, without further ado, let's see. Let's go back. There we go. That was a longer video, and I fumbled around a little bit. My apologies, but I hope it basically came out. I hope that it was understandable what I was trying to say. And that is basically that John gave us a completely different narrative where they know all of these glorious titles to which later Christianity placed upon Jesus after they reflected upon it. And he puts them right at the beginning of the story in the historical narrative, which is a big X. Nope, could not have happened. Completely false. And you should reject it. And it's a strong reason to reject the entire gospel, actually. And without further ado, thank you for watching. May God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.
Right, center, marching on.